Hello, yeah, again, everyone. This is your pal, Andrew Gabriel here, fellow metalhead, whatever. And today I decided to do another video and just go over a few things. So, because I feel like there's a lot of, I guess, misconceptions about me. Well, not exactly misconceptions, but a lot of people get the wrong idea that I'm this big bad metal elitist or whatever, because I'm really not. I can, like, listen to pretty much everything. These are five or technically six bands that you wouldn't expect me to like. And I got notes written down here. I'm going to go over them in a bit, but a lot of people seem to think that I'm bandwagoning off of J-Dog or whatever, or think that I'm trying to be like him or whatnot. And I don't agree with a lot of things he says. Like, you really think that I really think... Do you really think that every time I watch a J-Dog video, I'm taking notes of, like, what opinions he has and basically go off of that? Like, I don't agree with his both opinions. I don't agree with much of his Gorguts opinions. I agree with some of them, but not a lot of them. And I certainly don't agree with his opinions on Mental Funeral, as I've said before, but these are bands that are ones you wouldn't expect me to like, but I would think that they make me more unique in a way as opposed to other metalheads. And that's not me saying that I'm better, that's not me saying that I'm the greatest or anything like that. Just me saying that this is what makes me different from a lot of those people. And I've mentioned some of these before, but I feel like I should go over them again just because, I don't know, I'm trying out new things. And I feel like I would go into more into detail, and I feel like that would be best if I were to record it on camera. So I've mentioned this one before, and a lot of people have made fun of me for it. A lot of people have given me shit for it. And it's Sleep Token, and the thing with them is that I can understand why someone wouldn't be into their sound. It's especially if you don't like stuff like trap or gents. I can understand that because those are not the most appealing genres in my book as either. But for me, not everything exactly sticks, but I don't engage with them as if they were a metal band. And a lot of people are basically view through those lens, and because of that, I feel like there's a good number of people who are hating them because they're bandwagoning, or they're basically indoctrinated into thinking that they are the worst thing ever. And I've heard people say shit like they're the worst thing since Falling in Reverse or whatever. And I mean, they're I don't think they're similar, first of all, and second of all, you really think that something as memeable as Falling in Reverse is as bad as Sleep Token, which is basically just sad boy music in comparison? And because of that, I just think people, whether they're on Twitter, whether they're on Blue Sky, whether they're on Facebook or whatever, they're mainly just taking the opinions from people that they look up to or people that they don't even know, and they think, oh, this guy sounds sophisticated, or this guy sounds cool because he says this. And I've met people who, or I know people who don't like Sleep Token at all, and it's completely fine. But don't come to me and say that you're all knowing about like music and all that, because there are a lot of people who do that and they over exaggerate about how bad they are. And in a way, I feel like they kind of don't get to say that, especially if they're around my age group, because a lot of people in my age group tend to, again, over-exaggerate to get their point across. And whenever I hear someone like, I don't know if he would appreciate me calling him out, not calling him out, but like name-dropping him, but if someone like Brian Bergeron says that Sleep Token is the worst thing that has ever graced my ears, he's allowed to say that because, again, he's much older than a lot of these kids who are basically made the whole thing about Sleep Token. And again, I guess this is more about how much I don't like the Sleep Token haters, but I think their fans are just as bad as anything. Because if anything, they're more unproductive than a lot of people who just don't like music. Because to me, Sleep Token isn't the worst thing I ever heard. I like it, and there's bands that I would say that are better, but to me, it's just good vibey music, and some things don't hit. There's cringe moments, of course. Some of the trap beats, some of the rapping can get a little, not out of hand, but a little too. Again, it makes me wince a bit, but it's a minor inconvenience opposed to it being an actual devastating thing for the music. So I think in all my complaining about people who just take opinions, they basically copy paste it through the lens of their own worldview, which isn't really their own worldview. It's just they're just copying someone else's worldview, and that's just stupid. And again, it's just I don't enjoy them as a metal band. They're not a metal band to me. They vaguely flirt with gent, and that's arguably a metal genre, but it's also arguably not, in my opinion. But that's a video for another day. I also really like the singer's voice, and not vocals aren't everything, but I feel like with him, it elevates the music in a way, and it certainly helps it make it more emotional in the same way that another band on my list, but we'll get to that in a minute. But I've heard 2 albums by them. Again, some of the stuff on there wasn't my thing. Some others were more my thing. It's stuff that I could just listen to and be like, oh, this is actually pretty good. As opposed to, I mean, SoundCloud rap or whatever it's called. I still don't get the hype behind Blade or whatever that Fantano shit's called, because I've never met a person in my life or spoken to a person in my life, or in this timeline rather, who legitimately goes out of their way to listen to Blade. And to be fair, I've never met a person in my life who goes out of their way to listen to Sleep Token either. But to me, those people, they at least aren't complaining as much, because, again, Blade fans, in my experience, tend to complain way more about music, if anything. Sleep Token fans are just there to be happy or some shit. But enough of my rambling. Let's continue on with the actual list. That was just an honorable mention because, again, I don't like entire things by them, but they're pretty much a band that I can say I enjoy, as opposed to a few other bands. But number 5 is one that you probably already know, and that is Deftones. And again, I love the singer's voice, mainly Chino Moreno, I think that's his name. And again, he's very emotional, but very uplifting. Again, it makes the music feel more vibey, and yeah, they're basically, again, it's just vibe music, and you can't go wrong with vibe music. And if anything, it's less about the vibe and more about not the musicality, but some of the simplicities about it. And with that, you get stuff like their album Around the Fur or White Pony, which are my 2 favorites. Stuff like Adrenaline and some of the later albums aren't really my thing, but I love those 2 albums, Around the Fur and White Pony, as well as Saturday Night Wrist. I don't know how you pronounce it, but those 3 albums are pretty much my favorites by them. There's other stuff that I can care less about, but they were one of my first bands, and those are the albums I listened to the most while growing up around them. And because of that, you get so much, like, again, the thing I was going to mention earlier, but kind of got sidetracked, but I think the reason why I came so much to like them again, because there was a time where I just didn't care for them and I didn't know how to express it. But for me, they have a commonality with a lot of post-hardcore, and to me, when people say that they're new metal, I don't really agree. They're more alt metal, but who flirt with post-hardcore. When I mean by post-hardcore, I mean like bands like Fugazi, but they don't really sound like Fugazi. So who do they sound like? Quicksand, Helmet, Hum, those bands. And I love all 3 of those bands, as I mentioned before. But again, I have a bias towards them. I love them. I would love to see them one day live, hopefully. But continuing on with the list, we have Green Day. And again, they were another one of my first bands. And again, not everything by them is great. In fact, they have quite a few stinkers. But when I heard certain songs from American Idiot, which is not my favorite album by them. That was like when I was very, very young, before I was even into music. And because of that, you get songs like Holiday, and songs like the Title Track, or even Suburb of Jesus, or Jesus of Suburbia, or whatever it's called. Some of those aren't my favorite songs by them, but they are the best songs off the album, and because of that, it's very, very much a nostalgia thing for me. But aside from American Idiot, you have Dookie and Insomnia, which, for pop punk, they're pretty aggressive, and I've went over this before, but there is pop punk that I really enjoy, aside from like the MTV shit, because most of the MTV shit, to me, it sucks. But with bands like Alkaline Trio, which I guess is sort of MTV-ish, but they're not really well known as Green Day, or God forbid Blink-182 or New Found Glory, but you have bands like Screeching Weasels, Jawbreaker, Sloppy Seconds. I think All and Descendants also fall under that, which are my two favorite bands within the pop punk realm. And they're not necessarily pop punk, but Misfits get really poppy, especially on their first, and I would say, especially on their like Danzig era. That's what I meant to say. But with that, you get so much with not so much with Green Day, but you get, again, with me, it's a personal bias because I grew up with them, but there are just songs by them I love. Pulling Teeth, Longview, fucking Welcome to Paradise. Again, they're very aggressive, but they're also poppy in the same way that something like the Beach Boys or the Beatles would be. And I like those bands too, but I probably like Green Day more, if anything, because, again, the bias. And yeah, those are my two favorite albums by them. I like Nimrod. That one's a good one. It's not my favorite. Then I have to hear Warning Again, and then some of the stuff after American Idiot. It's basically, I can deal without it. I haven't heard all of it, but I think most of it I can go my entire life without hearing ever, because I fell off with them for a bit because I kind of got more in the middle, and that was before I was even really into anything vaguely extreme. Because right before I got into Pig Destroyer, which was around the time I was getting into the Big Four, I would say, I was just into Nirvana and Green Day. And Nirvana is a band that I hope I don't have to explain, because I've already went over it time and time again with people, both on Facebook and I think on here as well, even if I'm just starting up the channel and all that. But it's just that you have to really consider that even if these aren't your particularly favorite bands, I do have just a bias for them. And with that, you just get bands like Green Day. And for me, not every one of their albums are great, especially re-listening to them, but some of their early stuff especially is kind of underrated. 39 and Smooth Days or whatever, Kerplunk. Those are not my favorites by them, again, but they're very overlooked, and they're very, again, more raw, more aggressive, more in your face, as opposed to a lot of pop punk that came from that specific era. And I guess next on my list is Shadows Fall, which I don't really like the cookie cutter metalcore shit. I don't really like bands like As I Lay Dying, All That Remains, Trivium, especially Trivium. That band fucking sucks. But with Shadows Fall, especially with their first two albums, I haven't heard the rest in a while, at least. It's actually pretty intelligently written from my perspective. It's a lot like Slaughter Soul, or more or less Terminal Spirit Disease, but there's a lot more variety, and it's a lot less straightforward. Not saying that Slaughter Soul, I like it better than Slaughter Soul, but they're pretty much, they take the whole idea of that album sound and take it to another level, as opposed to other bands like, again, who else is in there? As Hope Dies or some shit like that. Fuck off. But again, very melodic guitarist, especially from Jonathan Donas, I think. He went on to play in Anthrax, and I could tell why. He's a fabulous guitarist. Some of the best solos I ever heard was on the first Shadows Fall record, Summer Eyes to the Sky, I think it's called. I have the second one, but I don't have the first one. But the first one's by far my favorite, and it doesn't have Brian Ferry on there, who was originally in Again, a band called Overcast, who are probably I probably prefer them, but they're less, I guess, embarrassing to admit to like than Shadows Fall. But it was Phil Labonte who sung on there, who I personally think is a fucking idiot, and all that remains less said about them, the better. Uh, he's amazing on the debut, and it's usually him doing harsh vocals, and Jonathan's doing the cleans. And I wish I could hear more of Jonathan's cleans on the later stuff, but I don't know what happened. I guess Brian Fair took over, and therefore it was just more or less a one duty job. Let me just take some water, then I'll continue. And I just missed that dual vocal action, because growing up, again, there were death metal bands I liked with dual vocal action. Nile, not Cryptopsy, but not so much my thing anymore, but Dying Fetus had that. A lot of bands did. Goroded, I'm trying to think of others. Early Aborted, they had that going on. And it's just, I know it's like, I can't stand the good cop, bad cop trend, but to hear between two different vocalists is pretty much unique for the genre. Or I should say, it should have been the trend for the genre, because this is basically, the first Shadows Fall record is basically the first of its kind. It's, it's the melodic type of metalcore that basically rips off at the gates. But a lot of bands who rip off at the gates at least do it in their own way, to where it's, again, not emo bullshit. So there's that. And speaking of emo bullshit, next one on my list is a band I've talked about before, but their name is Finch, and none of you probably have ever heard of them. And if you do not like whiny vocals, if you hate emo, if you hate flop hairs, if you hate pretty much anything like that, please do not check them out, because you will hate them with your heart. And What It Is to Burn is a very important album for me for personal reasons, but it's also just like one of the most catchiest, most fun, but also emotionally in-depth albums that I've ever heard. And therefore you would get songs like Letters to You, Ender, which is my favorite song by them, and the title track is a fucking classic. And their second album, while it is more musically intricate, varied, and I would say detailed, I like it a bit less because it doesn't have that nostalgia factor to me. And it's still a very good album. It's probably an 8, whereas the debut is like a 10 for me. It's just that I'm missing those, I guess, whiny vocals and all that. Because, if anything, the vocalist on the second album, I forgot what it's called. It's something like, I don't know what it was exactly called. I don't remember, but it was basically, he basically sounds more like Mike Patton than anything, as opposed to his own unique style. And I get that they were being influenced by other stuff, but for me, I just love it when Finch are Finch. And because of that, they're one of my favorites. And they have some of the Deftones crossover appeal, sort of like a band that's similar to them and get compared to them all the time, Glassjaw, who I also really love, but that's a story for another day. So you get these like emotional, like pop punky, which sounds terrible, but I really like it, but pop punky riffs, as opposed to, it's a basically alternation between pop punk riffs and down-tuned Deftones-esque ones. So therefore you get, it's basically a mix of Jimmy Eat World mixed with Deftones, and that's what I like about them very much. And so we get to the final band on our list, and this isn't the most surprising, I would say, but it is a band that a lot of people wouldn't have guessed me that I would have liked. And that, to me, is Rise Against. And you could say whatever you want about them. You could call them sellouts. You could call them, not true political activists because they're assigned to a major label or whatever. Blah, blah, blah. Rage Against the Machine did the same thing. And you know what? They have more knowledge in them, especially Zach De La Roca. They have more political knowledge in them, as opposed to a lot of people who try to get into politics nowadays. So that's all I'm going to say. But I mean, what else is there to say? They're peak 2000s melodic hardcore, and some people will call them emo or pop punk, but they're really melodic hardcore, and there's some of that Hot Topic appeal. But again, I don't care. Music's music, and music's fucking great. And again, it's very emotional, especially Tim's vocals, emotional and uplifting, very varied between songs that are very slow, but also very fast, aggressive, very in your face, and it's just again a vibe to me. There's really no other way to describe it. And for me, it's a comfort band in some ways as well, because with Rise Against, you could listen to them like whenever, and they would always bring you up. So that's pretty much all I have for today. But if you have any bands that you wouldn't expect people for you to like, you could leave them down in the comments or whatever. You could discuss them with me. Do you think I'm a fucking poser for liking Sleep Token or whatever, or do you think I'm a fucking or if I'm a mastermind, if anything, because I actually delve into stuff that I like and I'm very honest about it, as opposed to other people who would just like lie about their taste. Like I listen to Archgoat all the time, which I do like Archgoat. There's a poster back there. I listen to Archgoat, Blasphemy, Vlad Tepes, Velaz, Graveland, all that Madonna's black metal shit.